Guys, if anyone told me that in 2025, any politician in South Africa would liken what's actually going on right now in South Africa to the possibilities of what went on in June 2024 when the Gen Zs in Kenya came out in the streets to actually repel and repeal the finance bill that was being passed by the government of President Ruto in Kenya, I wouldn't believe. But here we have Minister John Steenhuisen actually alluding to the fact that South Africa just escaped what actually might have been a June 2024 moment in Kenya when the Gen Zs in Kenya rose up, in leaderless, organized fashion to really fight against the government's proposed finance bill 2024. He actually argues that in Kenya, the senators and the members of parliament were actually going ahead to pass a bill that was unpopular to the masses, to the young Gen Zs who were actually already poor and decadent and actually hopeless in a way. And yet there was supposed to be an increase in VAT for their basic amenities like sanitary pads for the for the ladies, things of like M-Pesa, the local transactions. There was supposed to be a VAT increase on that, and some other basic things that these youngsters usually use on the daily. And so they really came out in the street, and the whole world almost was shut down as they watched Kenya's youth stand up against the government. But now Minister John Steenhuisen is actually arguing that that was almost what happened. If this 2% VAT increase that Minister Godongwana actually and the ANC actually as a group thought to pass through as a basis for the budget to sort of like raise the 60 billion rand that South Africa's economy needs to prop up itself in these very challenging times where it's almost having a diplomatic face-off with the US, with a possibility of taxpayers. I think it's actually already recorded that South Africa has a case where there has been 33,000 taxpayers who changed their tax residency from South Africa to other countries. It was argued that 1,700 billionaires actually had left South Africa. I think this was in 2023. There was also the case that about 22,000 or thereabout doctors were unemployed in South Africa, and coupled with the 33.3% unemployment rate, and also the fact when you listen to Moletin Mbeki argues that almost 50.6% of South Africa's households are on SASSA. So it's a really challenging place for the poor to find themselves in South Africa. Yet, this proposal by the government, Minister Godongwana, was to salvage this whole situation, was to increase value-added tax on, I think, these kind of commodities to raise 60 billion to be able to fund some of the, sectors of the economy that would now save the country from the downward slope it actually has found itself to be going. And so we could see that, the whole parliament shut down as the DA refuted vociferously that whole attempt. So John Steenhuisen here in this video is actually arguing and breaking down how it is that the DA had to rise, because what South Africa was almost going close to a June 24 Gen Z revolution kind of moment. If that bill had been passed in parliament, that would actually be crushing to the poor, and what would have been an instability. And I think this is the basis for the DA's fight. The DA would be stepping on this to really counter some of the bills that actually might have been prepared by the ANC, giving the DA sort of like a foothold and a comeback in the wake of the Bella bill and other bills it tries to oppose. But this is actually a very, very firm, really kind of like shocking words to me that a minister in South Africa would actually almost compare what happened in Kenya in 2024, the riots, the protests, the anger that the youth, especially the Gen Zs, had against the government, comparing that possibility in South Africa. And if that goes on in South Africa, if that happened in South Africa, bro, nah, please, we don't even want to go there. But let's quickly listen to John Steenhuisen really break down how the DA seems to have saved South Africa from going down that route, and why the DA actually felt that the passing of a 2% VAT increase for basic amenities, or kind of like the amenities Minister Godongwana argued would be necessary to raise 60 billion for South Africa's economy, why the DA had to fight against that. And share your thoughts. Let's have a robust discussion in the comments.
We had a budget that was prepared to be tabled here that clearly did not have violent support from all parties, including some in the ANC. And it got withdrawn and postponed until a later date so that we could come back with a pro-growth, pro-jobs budget. And I think that this is something to be welcomed. I think it's a very clear sign that there is a government of national unity now with other parties around the table, and that cabinet and parliament is no longer just a rubber stamp, that if you want to get things done, it has to be based on consensus. And I think that South Africans were definitely the winner yesterday. I don't think any of the parties were the winners. I think the people of South Africa were winners because they woken up this morning without a 2% VAT increase to add to the already high cost of living that many are facing.
Agreed. And there is a lot of positive political analysis coming through and saying that this is a watershed moment for the positive for the country. The question is, why did it come down to the wire? Why couldn't this negotiation have happened before the minister was about to walk up to the podium?
Well, it had been happening. It had been happening for the last fortnight. It was only in the last 2 weeks that it was alerted to cabinet that there was a problem with both the expected projected income, but also the effect of the SRD grant court judgment, which had indicated that there would have to be a raising of the SRD grant. The money's got to come from somewhere. And there was a 60 billion rand hole in the budget, and we needed to fill that. And a variety of matters were discussed. Nothing was agreed on at that initial meeting. And a couple of days later, we were alerted to the fact that there was now this VAT increase on the table. We've been very clear in all of the meetings we've had, both with the Minister of Finance, but also in Cabinet, that a 2% increase in VAT would not be acceptable to us and to our electorate and voters, and that we would not be able to support a budget in Parliament that had a 2% VAT increase on it, because we care deeply about the South African citizens who are already, as I say, buckling under a huge strain. 2% of increasing VAT would have led to, I think, greater inflationary pressures on the economy, but also would have added to the burden of already overburdened citizens. And we mustn't underestimate the impact of these things on the ordinary lives of ordinary people. And we've seen in Kenya what happens when decisions are made thinking that, oh, well, people will just accept it. And I think that we've managed to avert that. And I think that's a positive thing. And I think it's the way a mature government operates.
I was chatting to Dawie Root from the Efficient Group just a moment ago, and he is saying that no party who is concerned about their citizens goes ahead with a dramatic VAT hike. And this is effectively what the ANC was trying to do. Does it show that the ANC is actually not operating in the interests of the man and woman on the street in South Africa?
Well, I want to just say that it precisely shows why coalitions are so important and so useful, because a single party with a single idea doesn't get an opportunity to now impose that on the rest of the country. It has to now be part of a negotiation. And the fact that the DA and other parties and some within the ANC put their foot down very clearly shows that this is a far healthier situation. I'm concerned that the matter was taken obviously to the wire, despite the very clear opposition from people within cabinet and as parties, and that was from all parties. And I think that it's a healthy sign now that a pause was put on this. Said, okay, we're not going to proceed down this road. We need to go back to the drawing board. Let's find something that's pro-growth, pro-jobs, and doesn't burden its citizens. And as I said at the beginning, I think the citizens are the real winners in this particular situation.
Dawie also saying, if you look at the fiscal accounts for the country, there's absolutely no further room to borrow. There's no further room to burden either South African business or South African consumers from a tax perspective. Looks like we're pretty much between a rock and a hard place when it comes to South Africa's finances.
Well, of course we are. And, what we need to do is look at other countries who've been in similar situations to ours, who are also emerging markets. Let's look at Argentina, for instance. Now, you may or may not like Mr. Milei and what he's doing in Argentina, but it's bold and it's new and it's brave and it's bringing down inflation and creating growth. I think South Africa similarly needs to take the big, bold, brave decisions now that are going to be required to promote growth. We've got to move beyond cut or tax. We've got to start moving to growth. because it's through growth that we're going to see the budget in a far healthier situation. Taxes writ a Laffer curb, and I think the SARS Commissioner has been very honest, and he needs to be commended for his honesty in what he's saying is the efficacy of greater tax increases. He's saying, it comes to a point where you can squeeze no more, and it becomes inefficient rather than efficient tax collection. And we must heed what Commissioner Kiesbet is saying. He knows what he's talking about. But secondly, we've got to move beyond just cuts. We've got to grow the economy. We've got a growth problem in South Africa. And unless we're prepared to take the bold chainsaw decisions, as Mr. Millay has done, I'm afraid we're going to be having this fight every year about what do we cut and how do we tax more. We've got to get growth moving in South Africa. And that's what this budget needs to do. How do you table a budget that has a 1.9% growth forecast when the president and the phoner has said very ambitiously, we want 3% growth? We need a budget on the table that's going to show how we're going to get to 3% growth, not 1.9% growth over the medium term. And that's what the focus, I believe, of the next few weeks has to be: a growth budget that stokes how we stimulate the economy, how we are able to cut more wasteful expenditure, but also relieve the burden on our already overburdened citizens.